What's up everyone, today we're going to take a look at the ASUS Zephyrus GA503Q. This is the latest and greatest 2021 Zephyrus. It has the AMD Ryzen 9 5900HS 8-core CPU, 16GB of RAM, and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 which has a 100-watt TDP. It has a 1TB SSD, the latest Wi-Fi 6 technology, and a 1440p 165Hz display. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, shall we? Overall build quality on the laptop is pretty good. It's very sturdy all around, on the palm rest at least, and it feels pretty solid. Now the display has some flex to it, and it's not super stiff, but I've seen worse. And the keyboard itself is pretty good. It has a nice little texture to the keys. Speaking of keys, there's these 4 keys up here, and then we have the status light indicators. But I'm not a fan of those 4 keys. They're just kind of there. It looks kind of weird. The touchpad is pretty good. Scrolling is very smooth. This is the power adapter that comes with the laptop. It's not too big and it's not too small. Now, one thing that I'm really interested in is the 6-speaker audio with Dolby Atmos. Alright, so ASUS did something right this time. The speakers are actually on top, not like at the bottom from the previous laptop I reviewed. So the sound is clear, it sounds good. The only thing is, it doesn't get too loud. It doesn't have the loudness to it, but it does have a nice balanced sound. Bass is not too bad for a small laptop like this, like a thinner laptop. Although, to be fair, my 15-inch MacBook Pro still has more bass. But it's getting there. Audio is getting there. Next, let's take a look at the display. So as you can see, the bezel on the bottom is a bit big, but the bezel on the sides and on top is quite small. And then, looking at the screen, we have a brightness of 312 nits, which isn't too bright. Contrast is 992, which is pretty good. The color space is 100% DCI-P3. Black level is around 0.34, and it has a 165Hz 2560 by 1440 display. Viewing angles are pretty good. Interestingly, there's no webcam here. And another cool feature is when you open the display up, it actually props open the laptop to increase airflow. Looking at the ports, we have a vent, the power adapter, HDMI out, Ethernet, USB Type-A, 2 Type-Cs, and audio. On the other side, we have the Kensington lock, another vent, micro SD reader, and another USB Type-A. On the back, we just have the status light indicators and nothing else. And another cool trick about the LCD is when you move it around, there's this rainbow effect, which looks pretty cool. Moving on to the SSD, it has a pretty high performance SSD. It's not Samsung 980 Pro level, but it's still pretty good. Alright, moving on to benchmarks. So Cinebench, we have multi-core and single-core for both R20 and R23. The CPU performs very well. This is a laptop CPU that actually performs pretty good considering the specs. Looking at gaming, at 1080p we get over 60 FPS in pretty much every game besides Cyberpunk 2077. Now this does have a 165Hz refresh rate monitor, and it's pretty much wasted since we're not getting high enough FPS. You definitely want to play games on high or medium settings and not ultra. At 1440p, which is a native resolution, things get a little worse. Most games are getting less than 60 FPS, except for games that aren't as demanding. So you're definitely going to want to turn down the graphics settings if you want to enjoy that 165Hz display. Let's go ahead and see how the fan noise sounds, shall we? The laptop's actually pretty quiet until the fans ramp up, and let's take a look why that happens. As you can see in Cinebench, the CPU ran at 94C both times, and even in games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Cyberpunk, the CPU is running in the 90s. Interestingly, in Borderlands 3 it was at 79, so it really depends on what you're doing, but for CPU intensive tasks you're going to be looking at the mid 90s for temperatures, which isn't the greatest, but this is an 8-core CPU in a laptop. Looking at the GPU, it definitely performs a lot better, and this is always the case in gaming laptops, at least in my experience. The GPU's peak was around 81 in gaming and stayed below 80 in most other games that aren't as demanding. Finally, let's take a look at battery life. As you can see, the Zephyrus G15 gets some of the best battery life out of gaming laptops here. Now, it even beats my MacBook Pro, and it's getting a little over 6 hours. Keeping in mind, my battery life tests are a little more demanding than others. This will tell you that you can get a good 6 hours of medium to light usage on this laptop, which is great. For gaming, don't expect more than an hour because you don't game on a gaming laptop on battery. To service the laptop, you must remove all the screws around the whole laptop, and there are 3 hidden screws under these little rubber grommets right here. Once you have all these removed, you're going to go ahead and see this. Now, as you can see, we have a empty RAM slot right here, and we have our M.2 here, and we have a secondary M.2 right here. We also have a Wi-Fi slot here, and looking around, this is the CPU and GPU heatsink. It's unified, but it's easy to service if you need to. And then looking around over here, we have the speakers on the left and right for the bottom, and then this huge 90 watt hour battery. So overall, the laptop's pretty good. It costs $17.99, so around $1,900 after taxes. And the build quality is pretty good, and it's a well-rounded laptop. Temperatures in a laptop are always going to be a problem, but this has an 8-core AMD Ryzen CPU. So 94 degrees seems to be as high as it got through all my testing. But under most usages, it seemed to be fine. Battery life is great. Sound system is balanced, so definitely recommend it. There are definitely many options out there for that price, but ASUS Zephyrus is doing pretty good. So with that said, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one.